Why, hi there, I'm Ron Juckett, and today on Retro Sports Network, I'm going to give you some troubleshooting tips if you're having a little difficulty trying to live stream. Now, there are several different ways to live stream on YouTube or Twitch and all that. If you have over 1,000 subscribers and want to do it on your phone or record off your phone and upload it, that tends to be the easiest thing, or using the basic go to YouTube itself and run the webcam app, and just kind of like this, it'll kind of process everything. You don't need to touch anything, and you're good to go. But if you want to add things like different parts of video, or not just see your face in the camera, or play games, or what have you, that's when things kind of run into some trouble. Once you start going into uh, just more than you and the camera. And so if you're having trouble trying to get that all to work, here are a couple things that you might be able to use to at least diagnose where your problem is. The first one we're going to do, okay, there are three things. First, I can't show you, but it's important to have your Ethernet cord in the computer and not go wireless. Why? Well, because Wi-Fi kind of lags a little bit. It takes a lot to go back and forth, and the computer has to process all that. That's going to be the third part of this thing, is talking about how your computer does and doesn't process things. But especially with Wi-Fi, a lot of people use it. And so depending on what time of the night you're going or how reliable your connection is, Wi-Fi just isn't that stable for upstreaming. For downstreaming, for watching something, that's going to give you everything that you want. But for upstream, remember, you're creating content, and you're just taking the chance. When I first started to restream or stream live again, I used a laptop, and I used my Wi-Fi to stream, even though the router's in the same room, and my wife was watching something else, and that split the Wi-Fi stream, and I ended up with a bad stream and ended up having audio problems on the other end of it because I was dropping frames because the computer could not keep up with the amount of data I needed to push up to my router. The easiest thing to do is the Ethernet, up and down the wire. Okay, that is tip number one. Tip number two, figure out how much of a connection you have on your computer to your internet, because especially if you stream in high definition, and really, if you're streaming any cards or dice or anything that requires a lot of reading on the screen, you need to stream that in high definition, or else people won't be able to read it. So let's take a look at how we do a speed test. Alright, we just Google the word speed test, and voila, right at the top, it lets you run a speed test. So that's what we're going to do. We want to figure out how much we can send up to our servers, because everything goes up and down. So let's run one now, shall we? Look at that speed coming down. Oh, 170, 100, and yeah, so you could like stream games, Netflix, and all that. That's fine. We don't care about the download number. We're caring about the upload number. Ooh, okay. That's what you want to pay attention to. So it looks like 11.7, 11.8, 11.9. So that's the limit of what we can send up. Okay? In my case, my internet speed is very fast. I can upload to YouTube at 11.6 megabits per second. That isn't very fast. You can go down a lot, but you really can't go up a lot. And if you are sharing a connection, let's say two people Wi-Fi, that's going to be cut down even more because they're sending data too when they're trying to send it to two places at once. So pay attention to that upload number. The upload number is key. Don't worry about the download. Yes, if you got broadband, that's pretty quick, and that's the equivalent of, on the download, of being able to stream almost 10 full high-definition channels at once. Problem is, you're creating one high-definition channel going the other way, and you're not even able to do that. Technically, a high-definition speed for television is 19 megabits per second. This connection can only do 11.6. Uh-oh, what does that mean? Well, really, it doesn't mean too much. You should be fine if you have anything over 5 megabits per second. We'll show that in a second. Um, but it isn't as a true video file, a high definition picture. All right. So now let's go to the next thing. What bit rate should we be? I have 11.6 megabits per second. How much is YouTube going to need for me to send a stream? Okay, so we called up the YouTube help and we're going to look here. Now, we're going to look on the numbers on the right, on the left-hand column there. If you are streaming a basic game such as an action PC or OOTP or cards and dice, ignore the numbers on the right. You do not need to send anything at 50 to 60 frames per second. If you are streaming a first-person shooter or Fortnite or iRacing or any of those type games, yes, because they're coming to you at 50, 60 frames a second. That's what looks natural, and that's what you should send up. But for a basic text-based game such as the Action PC series, even the Golf or Second and 10 or Digital Diamond or Diamond Mine, you're going to look at that 30 frame per second thing. And for a 720p picture, you should have a minimum setting of 5 megabits per second or 5,000 kilobits per second. That's what makes up a 720p picture. Now, what is a 720p picture, you ask? Well, let's just say that your basic home television is either a 720p or 1080p, which means that it is scanning a minimum of 720 lines. Progressive means P means progressive. 720 lines at 30 times per second. That's what constitutes a modern television picture. I stream at 1080p because pretty much everything I do is text-based, and so I have to be able to send up to YouTube as much as 8 megabits per second of information. So my computer can send that 1080 lines per second of progressive, or per frame of progressive video at 30 times per second. We'll get to the calculator on that in a moment. So the minimum, if you're going to be able to put a readable text on the screen, is 720p, and you need 5 megabits per second. You saw I have 11.5 megabits per second on my hardwire, and that's without the wife home, so I'm the only one that's using it. So theoretically, I couldn't even send up 60 frames per second at 1080p. So the best way to do that is check either your settings in OBS or XSplit or whatever you use for streaming, and make sure that it's set for, if you're in 720p, a minimum of 5,000 kilobits or 5 megabits per second. If you are sending less than that, the computer isn't going to know what to do. You're not sending it enough information to render, and that is part of the problem. So the minimum needs to be, like I said, for 720p, it's 5 megabits per second. If you're doing 1080p, it's 8 megabits per second. That's a lot of information to send up. For me, that is most of my upload speed. That's a lot of it. Okay? And that's just for standard pictures. If you want to do a high definition thing, 1080p can require up to 10 megabits per second if you're doing it in standard frame rate of 30, and 15 if you're doing it for 60. That's a lot of data. Remember, if you're watching a high definition stream on television, because everything is a stream these days, it's coming back to you in 19 megabits per second. Some, like Netflix and stuff like that, is condensed. But that's basically what it is. A raw, if you're watching like ESPN or anything like that, it's 19 megabits per second down. You are sending anywhere for full, pure, high definition of 10 to 15 megabits per second. So as a minimum, for a 720p picture, it's 5 megabits per second up is what you should be shooting for. But even if you can get through all that, get the right speed and get your software all configured, you have another problem. Your processor has to run it all. It takes a lot of firepower to produce a video. I'm looking right now. I've got a Core i5 7th generation 16 gigabit system. And as I look down at my recording and streaming software, my processor, my CPU is running at 19% and my GPU is running at 30%. Yep, I have a separate GPU or graphics processing unit to help run everything, because streaming takes power. It takes a lot to process video. Why does it take so much horsepower to do video? Well, let's say for a 1080p video, which this is, every second that I roll, my computer has to process 32,400 lines of video. That's 1,080 lines times 30 frames. So every second it has to draw and render 32,400 lines of video production. And as I'm talking, I'm watching what my compute processors are doing, and they're running anywhere between 10 and 30%. But this computer I bought specifically for streaming, which I know for a lot of people, at least to start off with, isn't the case. So when I Googled streaming laptop computers, this is one of the ones that showed up, an Acer Aspire 7 casual gaming, not even a top of the line. I wish I'd seen this when I was shopping for the computer I have, although I do love the Acers. A 15-inch screen, a 6-core Intel i7-8750 processor with an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1050 Ti, which is what I have on my computer, 4 gigabytes of that, 8 gigabytes of memory, 120 gigabytes a solid-state drive, and a 1 terabyte regular hard drive that runs Windows 10 at 64 bits. What the hell does that all mean? Ah! All right, let's go through them specifically, and the price, which actually is not a bad price, under $1,000. So let's take a look. So if this is a casual gaming and streaming machine, which means that it should have the horsepower to pretty much run whatever you want, to process streams and process 1080 videos. Okay, let's start with the RAM size, 16 gigabytes. That's a lot of firepower, but that's what I have in my machine, and it runs so much cooler. A lot of you, thinking, oh, okay, you're having fun watching me and you're playing the games and you want to do this, but you bought a computer 2 or 3 years ago to word process or to whatever it is. I mean, this is a very specific machine, and in order to process and render smoothly, because remember, if you're rendering video like this, it has to draw it a second time, and it has to store it. So it's doing a lot of the work here. It needs a lot of horsepower. And when your older processor runs hot, things tend to overheat. That's why I had to go out last October and get another computer, because the computer I was trying to stream on, which I bought for word processing and for the writing job, it was just too much. It was just too slow. It didn't know what to do, and it ran very, very hot. Computers, especially laptop computers, tend to overheat. And so the more oomph you give it, the better it's going to run in the long run. We don't need to worry about Intel being the processor. Look at the processor speed, 4.1 gigahertz with 6 cores in it. Because gaming takes a lot. Graphics take a lot of juice. It takes a lot of electricity and a lot of processing power for you to play Halo or whatever, or Fortnite. Okay? The display resolution, that's 1080p. Don't worry about the screen size and that. But the processor core is 6, and the RAM type DD4. So it's, and I forget, 16 gigs of memory, and it doesn't even show that the fact that there's also a separate GPU memory. Hold on a sec. Okay, let's go through the title again. NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1050 Ti, which is not a modern graphics card by any stretch of the imagination. It's at least 2 or 3 years old. 4 gigabytes. Why? In fact, that description here doesn't even match what it says down there in the specifics, because you want a GPU helps take the burden off the regular CPU to help render things better. That's how I can get smooth video. I'm not suggesting at all that you run out and buy $1,000 computer, but in order to do this and for it to look good, I have a separate graphics processor to go along with my central processing unit or core processing unit. So the graphics processor has 4 gigabytes of memory just to crunch graphics, just to see what you would do. If I was to do like Flight Simulator, it runs on the graphics card, which takes the pressure off the regular processors to do its business. It's all computing, it's all doing math, it's all there, and that's why a lot of older computers lag. It's just trying too hard to run software that is too hard or not meant for stuff that's built there. So again, this puppy has a 6-core i7 processor and a separate graphics card. That's what they're recommending for you to do if you want to game and stream on either Twitch or YouTube. That's pretty amazing. You don't need to worry about fingerprint readers and that. I mean, that's just a lot of oomph. Horsepower is big. This bad boy, the Acer Predator Helios, is the top editor's choice at one of the websites I was looking at for a streaming laptop. And what goodies does it have? Well, it's got the latest Intel i7 CPU that runs up to 3.8 gigahertz. God knows how many cores of that. 16 gigabytes of super fast regular memory and a GTX GeForce 1066 gigabyte graphics processing unit, plus it's VR ready. It'll only set you back $1,089, but you should be able to stream whatever game you want. But, Ron, you say, I'm just streaming Stratomatic, man. I don't need all that. No, but you do need to be able to have enough memory and power in order for your computer to process the information that you're doing. And so, although that would even seem to be an overkill, that's a better system than what I have. Let me show you exactly, as I've got everything open. I told you some of the numbers, but let me actually show you, just as I'm recording this video, what my computer is actually doing. Here is everything that my computer is doing as I speak to you right now. 12.8% of my CPU is going just to render this video, just for me to be able to talk into a recorder and go blah, 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 blah. And it's taking almost a full gigabyte of memory and writing a disk at the same time. Look at that disk speed. That's slow. Plus, I'm using 30% of my graphics capability just to do it, let alone all the other processes that are running in the background. Discord, Skype, Google Chrome, my video drivers. I don't know why the hell the Photos thing is open. More Google Chrome. I mean, that's all the processes that are running in the computer pretty much when you do anything. Okay? Performance. Let's see what we got. Here you go. So here's a live look at what my CPU is doing. I've got an i5-7300. Wish I'd known about that computer now. And you can just see the graphics going back and forth. I'm using sometimes up to half my processor just to record this video, let alone stream it up to YouTube and all that. Look at the memory. I have 16 gigs of memory, and I'm using almost half of it, as I said, just to do it. And as I'm running it to disk, my goodness, that's just to record the blessed thing, let alone that. Yes, it's all very nice in that, but look at the write speed. And that, of course, takes CPU and memory to tell it to write, which slows it down. That's how you get buffering. Here is my GPU. This is what it's actually doing. I've got a GPU. Actually, I've got two GPUs because of my stupid computer, the way it was set up and all that. So it's telling you how much processor and how much memory I'm actually. The memory isn't there, but look, I'm using the processor. And so that's taking the pressure off my CPU to be able to render this as smooth as possible. I'm not suggesting for a moment that you need to run out and buy a dedicated gaming or streaming machine to actually do it, but that just tells you right then and there how much is involved just for me to record a video of showing you my task manager, for goodness sakes. And here's the onboard graphics card, okay? Same thing, 33, 34%. Again, the memory thing is fine, but that's just a lot of computing for me just to show you how much computing it's doing. So video rendering takes a lot of math. That's why everything runs so fast, and that's why you have to have a lot of horsepower to do it and do it without the buffering. So usually when you have buffering, it's one of those two things. You're not sending enough information to YouTube or Twitch, and you are trying to put too much pressure on your processors or processor to do it all. So go back to see what you actually have for a processor in your computer and see, is it multiple cores? What did you buy your computer for? I said the computers that I showed in the demonstration, along with my specs, are not saying you need to run out and buy that. I'm not taking that responsibility at all. But that's what passes for streaming machines in 2019. That's a lot of horsepower. This laptop that I'm using was almost $1,000. I think I paid $900 for it just to have the separate computer, the graphics capabilities be not separate, or to be separate from the CPU. And most computers, especially most cheap computers, the graphics are share the same chip as the CPU, and for 98% of what to do, that's fine. But the second you turn on webcams to stream, and the second that you're going live to Twitch or YouTube, that's just sucking up the power, man. And that's probably one of the main reasons why you have the buffering. That, the wrong bit rate, and the fact that especially at night, if you're on Wi-Fi, you are sharing that connection with anyone else in your house and probably other people in your neighborhood. There's only so much bandwidth to go around, and nighttime is when people use it most. 70% of nighttime traffic is high definition streaming on, it's not porn, but Netflix. And so you got to compete with all that, and you got to send it back up and do it in a reasonable amount of time. When I'm live streaming, whether it's at lunch or at night or whatever, the delay usually from the time that I say it to I actually see reaction to it on the screen is about 10 seconds. That's actually a very fast process to actually play the game, have it go out of my computer, render it all up to YouTube, processed by YouTube, and sent back down for me to see it and for you guys to react to it. And so go into your settings and look to see how powerful your stuff is. For some of you, it's just going to be, that's the reality. But when I knew I wanted to seriously stream, and I wasn't sure what I was going to stream when I bought this computer, that's what it takes to send up even a moderate stream and have it render smooth at 30 frames a second. And that's just the bare minimums. All right, any questions, or if I'm wrong, you'll tell me anyway. Put that in the comments below. But that's what it takes to stream. So again, real quick, set your minimum bit rate if you're doing 720p to YouTube or Twitch to 5,000 kilobits per second or 5 megabits per second. That should be in your video settings in OBS and or XSplit. And again, take a look at your processor. If you're running a computer that's 3 or 4 years old, you're really going to have a tough time setting that much there, because it just takes a lot of power just to send this up. Remember, if you were doing a game, let's say if you wanted to Flight Simulator, or if one of ID Jester's games, the computer is actually rendering that twice. Once to him, and then again to the streaming software to render up so that you can see it. And that's a lot of math. All right, hit that like and subscribe. And like I said, if I'm wrong or if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comments, okay? I'm Ron Juckett for Retro Sports Network. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you the next time.